Stories just before you go, Rob. First of all, Harry and Meghan, apparently they let 3 more staff go from their Archewell employee toll. Have they? Does this mean they might be struggling financially, do you think?
Well, it's all relative. I don't think they struggle. I mean, I think they've had several £1 million. They've got several £1 million in the bank, if not more. You know, they live in a huge mansion in Montecito. So I don't think the word struggle. I think maybe they're in danger sometimes of, overspend, haven't they? They've got a big security bill. They're trying to get this global philanthropist role. It hasn't really come off at all, actually. And he was giving a talk to estate agents or real estate people in Toronto, in Canada, not that long ago. No, I don't think they're struggling financially, but I think basically they probably realise they've bitten off more than they can chew in terms of trying to be these global philanthropists. I mean, she couldn't afford really to get on the plane she didn't get on a plane to see her poor dad when he was in hospital. So perhaps things are tighter than we think.
Yeah, and one last story about them, a story that emerged over the weekend, that their charity, the Archewell Foundation, is apparently £1.8 million in the red. And that is because the charity has had £3.3 million worth of expenses over the past year. We don't know exactly where that money got spent, but the suggestion is that a lot of it might have gone on these 2 pretend royal tours that Harry and Meghan staged in Nigeria and Colombia. If that is the case, that their expenses for these tours have plunged their charity into the red, that wasn't why people would have donated, was it? To fund their luxury travel and their trips to these 2 countries. That's not
No,
quite...
I don't think research and development, or whatever they're going to call it, or foreign travel is really warranted. They had very clear aims, didn't they? I think they laid it out in their charitable mission when they launched their charity, and I'm sure being 1.8 million in the red, it wasn't one of those things. But I think it's about time, when it comes to charity, a little bit more transparency. We'd like to know exactly what has been spent, but more importantly, what has been given, what has been actually distributed to the causes they said they were going to be helping. It's very clear when the royals do it over here. People are very straightforward when it comes to charitable donations. I think if you're going to run a charity like this and be so bold and say what you're doing, and you have a mission statement, you've got to say what you're actually giving out and to who.
Exactly right. Rob, great to talk to you. Very happy Christmas to you. Robert Jobson there, brilliant royal journalist and author. His latest book, I think, was called The Windsor Legacy. Why don't you go out and buy it?
So, you've just seen the TalkTV clip discussing the latest financial filings from Archewell, and as usual, the conversation quickly jumps to numbers, deficits and speculation. But before we accept that framing, it's worth asking a more meaningful question. What do these numbers actually represent? Because when you look beyond the headline, what you're really seeing is a foundation that chose action over optics. Archewell Philanthropies spent just over $5 million in 2024, the highest expenditure in its history. And that fact alone is being presented as something negative. But spending money is literally the purpose of a charitable foundation. Money sitting untouched in an account doesn't help anyone. Money invested into communities does. One thing that often gets brushed aside in these discussions is that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle take no salary at all from Archewell. None. They don't financially benefit from this foundation. Their involvement is about responsibility, not reward. In a media environment where motives are constantly questioned, that detail matters. TalkTV also focused heavily on the idea of a deficit, comparing this year to the previous surplus. But philanthropy isn't a business chasing profit, it's a mission responding to need. Some years require deeper investment, especially when the work is global and community-based. This was one of those years. A major part of the increased spending came during Harry and Meghan's visits to Nigeria and Colombia, trips that were quickly labelled as unofficial royal tours. But labels don't change reality. What we actually saw were two people showing up, listening, and engaging with communities directly. In Nigeria, they spent time with young people through basketball initiatives programs that offer structure, confidence, and belonging. Archewell backed this up with real funding, including support for refurbishing basketball courts. That's not symbolism, that's infrastructure. In Colombia, they met with Vice President Francia Marquez, a leader internationally recognized for her work on equality and social justice. These weren't red carpet appearances. These were conversations about mental health, community safety, and opportunity topics that don't always make easy sound bites, but matter deeply. TalkTV also highlighted staff redundancies, which is always a sensitive subject. No one should pretend that job losses are easy or painless. But restructuring is not the same thing as collapse. In fact, it often signals evolution. Archewell is transitioning into a fiscal sponsor model, which allows it to move donations more efficiently to established charities already doing impactful work. This reduces administrative overhead and increases flexibility. It's a model many modern philanthropic organizations adopt as they mature. What stood out was the tone of the Sussexes' response, expressing gratitude and respect for the people who helped build Archewell to this point. That tells you a lot about leadership style. It's not about blame, it's about growth. Another detail that rarely gets discussed is the meaning behind the name Archewell itself. Arche comes from an ancient Greek word meaning source of action. Well represents a place you draw from. It's also named in part after their son, Archie. This foundation was never meant to sit quietly. It was meant to move, to respond, and to act. So when TalkTV frames this moment as failure, I see something different. I see a young foundation still refining how it operates. I see people willing to take criticism while continuing to invest in causes they believe in. And I see Harry and Meghan doing what they've always said they would do, using their platform to amplify issues that affect real lives. This work isn't neat. Philanthropy rarely is, especially when you're working across countries, cultures, and systems. But imperfection doesn't equal insincerity. And spending money on mental health, youth development, and community well-being shouldn't be controversial. Maybe the discomfort comes from something else, from seeing public figures step outside traditional roles and still choose service. From watching influence being used not for branding, but for bridge building. At the end of the day, this conversation doesn't need more outrage. It needs perspective. Because when you strip away the noise, what remains is a foundation that gave more than it kept, leaders who took nothing for themselves, and communities that gained real support. And that, to me, looks a lot more like purpose than failure.